My husband left me stranded, 300 miles away as a joke. 1 year later, my husband found me, and his smile vanished when he saw who stood behind me. Their laughter still echoes in my nightmares sometimes, sharp and shrill, like glass shattering on concrete. But on that blindingly bright afternoon, standing alone in a haze of dust, as the silver Ford F-150 disappeared around the bend, it was the loudest sound I had ever heard. "Mason!" I screamed, running after the truck, my arms flailing uselessly in the air. "Mason, stop! This isn't funny at all!" But they didn't stop. Through the rear window, I could see them, Mason in the driver's seat, and Haley, my sister-in-law, and London, my husband's best friend, poking their heads out the passenger window, phones raised, the little red recording lights blinking like tiny mocking eyes. Their voices carried back through the hot wind, warped by distance and engine noise, but impossible to mistake for anything other than their cruel amusement. "Good luck, Eleanor. See you in 300 miles." That was Haley, always the loudest one, always the one who pushed everything too far. Then the truck turned the corner, and suddenly the world went quiet except for the pounding of my heart and the whisper of wind through the empty stretch of land. I stood there for a full minute, unable to make sense of what had just happened. My mind kept trying to explain it away, insisting this had to be a mistake. Any second now, they'd come back around the bend, laughing but pretending to be sorry, and Mason would lean out the window with that boyish grin that used to make my knees weak and say, "You should have seen your face, babe." Then we'd all squeeze back into the truck and keep driving home to Arizona. Any moment now. But the road stayed empty. The only movement was the heat rising off the asphalt and a lazy tumbleweed drifting across the two-lane highway. I slowly turned, taking in my surroundings. The gas station was a lonely outpost, one pump, a tiny convenience store plastered with sun-faded beer and cigarette signs, and a restroom that reeked of ammonia even from 30 feet away. Beyond that, nothing but scrubland stretching toward distant mountains in every direction. The sign on the building read Cactus Jack's Last Chance Gas, and underneath, in smaller letters, Next station 87 miles. My phone. I slapped at my pockets in a panic, then remembered. I had left it in the cup holder of the truck when I ran back to grab the thing Mason had forgotten. He'd asked me so sweetly, too, with a smile that once made my knees go weak. "Honey, I'm tired. Could you run back and get it for me? You're the best." And like the dutiful wife I had been trained to be over 5 years of marriage, I had opened the door, gone back to the spot where we'd just rested, not questioning a thing. I'd left my phone, my wallet, my ID, everything in the truck. Now I had nothing. No money, no identification, no way to call anyone. The sun beat down on me like a punishment, and it hit me with a jolt of panic that I didn't even have water. I stumbled toward the little store. The cashier was a weathered man in his 60s, sitting behind a bulletproof window, watching a tiny TV with the volume turned low. "My husband abandoned me," I said, the words sounding strange as they left my mouth. "I need to use your phone." He barely glanced at me. "Pay phones out back. Takes coins only." "I don't have money. He took my wallet, please." "Store policy, ma'am. Can't let customers use the business line." He gestured vaguely toward the back of the building. The payphone had been vandalized, the cord cut, the receiver dangling uselessly. I stood there staring at it, my warped reflection staring back at me in the metal casing. I looked small and scared, my brown hair wild from the wind, my face flushed red from the sun. I walked back inside and tried again. "Please." "I'm stranded. My husband." "They usually come back," the cashier cut in, eyes still fixed on the TV. "Seen it a dozen times. Wives left, husbands left. They always come back after an hour or two. Just wait outside." But my gut told me Mason wouldn't be back in an hour. Maybe not in a few hours. Maybe not until tonight, after they'd had their fun and filmed enough footage for whatever stupid video they were making. I went back outside and sat on the curb, in the thin sliver of shade cast by the building. The asphalt was so hot, it burned through my jeans. I pulled my knees to my chest and tried to think past the panic swallowing my mind. This wasn't their first prank. The realization hit me like a heavy blanket dropping over my whole body. It was just the worst one, the cruelest one, the final one that made me see the pattern I'd been ignoring for years. There was the time London hid my car keys on the morning of my job interview, telling me it was just a prank, even as I sobbed and missed the opportunity I desperately needed. And when I told Mason, he just said, "Don't make a big deal out of it." There was the fake eviction notice they taped to our apartment door. So convincing I cried and packed for 3 hours before Mason finally told me it was just a joke. The water balloons filled with permanent dye that ruined my favorite dress. The fake calls from the police saying Mason had been arrested and needed bail money. I gathered everything I had and handed it to Haley, only to find out it was a prank, and the money never came back. The list went on and on, a whole catalog of small acts of cruelty disguised as entertainment. Even the most recent one, walking in on London and Mason in bed, when I gently closed the door and told them not to joke like that. And I accepted it. Every single time, I swallowed the pain and the anger because Mason said I needed to learn to take a joke, because London and Haley said I was uptight and boring, because Mason's mother said I should feel lucky to be part of such a fun-loving family. But sitting there, on that burning curb, abandoned at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, I finally admitted something to myself. Something I had buried even in my own thoughts. I hated them. I hated all of them. And even more than that, I hated who I had become. A punching bag for their amusement, a side character in Mason's story, someone who had been slowly destroying herself, trying to become whatever he wanted me to be. And maybe he had been cheating for a long time, and I'd just been too blind, too desperate, pretending not to see the signs. My phone, well, Mason's phone, buzzed in my back pocket. I had forgotten I was carrying it, after he'd left it behind an hour earlier. The screen showed 3% battery and 1 bar of service, but a message still managed to come through. "Don't be mad, just a prank for London's channel. We'll come back later. Relax." I stared at the words. London's channel. Her YouTube channel, where they posted their stupid pranks and challenges, trying their hardest to go viral, to become influencers, to turn their cruelty into profit. And Mason, willing to do anything to keep his best friend entertained, even if it meant sacrificing his wife's dignity. The phone died before I could reply. The screen went black, and all I could see was my warped reflection staring back. That was the moment I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to wait. I wasn't going to sit on this curb until they decided to come back. I wasn't playing anymore. A minivan pulled into the station, and a woman in her 30s, looking exhausted, stepped out to pump gas. 2 small children were screaming in the back seat. She had that drained, worn-down expression I recognized instantly, the look of someone who had given everything to everyone else and had nothing left for herself. I approached her carefully, trying not to look threatening or unhinged. "Excuse me. I'm sorry to bother you, but are you heading north?" She looked at me with wary eyes, assessing me. I must have looked desperate, because her expression softened. "I can take you as far as the state line. Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" "I just need to get out of here," I said, my voice catching even though I was trying to hold myself together. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Get in. But if you're running from something dangerous, I need to know. I've got my kids." "I'm running from myself," I told her honestly, running from the person I was stupid enough to become. Her name was Shelley, and we drove for 4 hours in silence. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't volunteer answers. We stopped once for gas and a restroom break, and she bought me a sandwich and a bottle of water, without me even asking. The kindness of a stranger, someone who owed me nothing, made my throat tighten with tears that didn't fall. She dropped me at a bus station in a small town whose name I barely remember. Before I stepped out, she handed me a phone charger and a $10 bill. Whatever you're running from, she said softly, glancing at her sleeping kids. I hope you get away. I stayed too long in something that was killing me. Don't make that same mistake. Thank you, I whispered. You saved my life today. No, she said with a sad smile. You saved your own. I just gave you a ride. Inside the station, I plugged Mason's dying phone into a wall outlet and waited for it to charge to 1%. Then I opened email and found the only person I knew would help me without hesitation. Aunt Maggie, my mother's sister, whom I hadn't spoken to in 3 years because Mason said she was toxic and controlling. I typed, "Can I stay with you? I don't know where else to go." 3 minutes later, the reply came. The key is under the mat. Come home anytime, sweetheart. I used Shelley's $10 and the last of Mason's battery to buy a one-way bus ticket. Then I popped out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed both pieces into the trash. As the bus pulled away and the town faded behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Real, overwhelming relief. But I also felt the first tremors of something else. Something buried under years of keeping the peace and trying to be the perfect wife. Anger. Not the explosive, destructive kind, but the cold, clarifying kind that burns away every lie and leaves only the truth behind. I was not Eleanor Whitlock anymore, not Mason's easygoing wife, who laughed at his boring jokes and accepted his half-hearted apologies. I was going to become someone else, someone who would never again sit on a curb waiting for men who were never coming back. The bus ride took 14 hours, stopping and changing routes several times. I arrived in Aunt Maggie's small coastal town just as dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air smelled faintly of salt water and pine, clean and cool after the desert heat I had left behind. Aunt Maggie was waiting for me in her rusted blue pickup truck, her silver hair braided neatly. When I stumbled off the bus, hollow-eyed and empty-handed, she looked at me once and pulled me into a hug, like I had just come home from war. She didn't ask what happened. She only said, "Let me get you inside." I slept almost 2 days straight. When I finally woke, Aunt Maggie was at the kitchen counter cooking, a plate of scrambled eggs and toast waiting for me. Beside it was an envelope. Inside were $300 in small bills and a folded slip of paper with an address. My friend Ruthie runs the diner on Main, Aunt Maggie said, without looking up from her knitting. She needs a server. She pays cash under the table, and she won't ask questions. Tell her your name is Eleanor Morgan. Morgan. My mother's maiden name. The name I had before I became a Whitlock. Why can't I use my real name? I asked, though I already knew why. Because you don't want to be found, Aunt Maggie said simply. And something tells me you don't. 3 days later, I started working at Ruthie's Diner. It was a small, worn-down place with cracked vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed in 20 years. But the coffee was good, and the customers were kind. I poured coffee, took orders, wiped tables, and slowly remembered what it felt like to be competent, to be appreciated for my effort, instead of my ability to endure. At night, I sat on Aunt Maggie's back porch and watched the sun melt into the ocean. The rhythm of the waves was hypnotic, and for the first time in years, I felt my shoulders loosen. I began sleeping without nightmares. I began laughing at customers' jokes without wondering how my laughter would be used against me. I began healing in slow, painful inches. 6 weeks after starting my new life, everything changed again. It was a slow Tuesday morning. Breakfast rush had ended, and I was refilling the napkin dispensers when the bell over the door rang violently. A tall, broad-shouldered man stumbled in, clutching his side. His gray shirt was soaked with dark blood. For one horrifying second, my trauma reflex kicked in, and I thought, this is a prank. Mason found me, and this is another sick game of theirs. But then the man's knees buckled, and he collapsed near the counter, and I saw his eyes, wild with pain and very, very real. "Help me!" he rasped before his head hit the floor. I moved without thinking, my body acting while my mind went blank. I grabbed a stack of clean towels from behind the counter and pressed them hard against the wound in his side. "Ruthie, call 911!" I shouted. "Right now!" The man's eyes locked onto mine. He fought to stay conscious, his hand gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "Stay with me," I said firmly. "Look at me. What's your name?" "Grant," he grit out. "All right, Grant. You're gonna be okay. The ambulance is coming. Just hang on." The EMTs arrived within minutes, a luxury of small-town life. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, Grant's eyes found mine again. "Thank you," he whispered. Then they were gone, sirens fading into the distance, and I stood in the middle of the diner, with blood on my hands and my heart pounding out of my chest. Ruthie touched my shoulder gently. "You did good, sweetheart. Real good. Now go wash up." I thought I would never see Grant again, but 3 days later, he walked through the diner door. His movements were stiff, one hand braced against the bandaged side of his torso, but he was upright and breathing steadily. He sat at the booth by the window, the one facing the entrance, and when I brought him his coffee, he looked at me with those clear gray eyes. "Thank you for saving my life, Eleanor." Something in the way he said my name, without expectation or weight, made my throat tighten. "It's nothing." "What happened to you?" "Wrong place, wrong time," he said, and something in his expression told me not to push. So I didn't. I just refilled his coffee and went back to work. After that, Grant became a regular. He came in every few days, always took the same booth, always kept an eye on the door. We had an unspoken agreement. I didn't ask about his past, and he didn't ask about mine. But slowly, over weeks and then months, we began to talk. At first, it was small things: the weather, the best items on the menu, the books we both happened to be reading. Then it grew deeper. He told me he used to be a detective in Chicago, that he got too close to something he wasn't supposed to see, that his own team turned on him and set him up. The shooting wasn't an accident. "I lost everything," he said one evening when the diner was nearly empty. "My badge, my career, my reputation. They covered it all up, made it look like I was the dirty one. I couldn't fight it without getting myself killed, so I ran." "Sounds like we're both running," I said quietly. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw understanding in his eyes. "Maybe, but I'm not running anymore. What about you?" I realized suddenly that I wasn't. I wasn't running from Mason or his sister or his mistress or my old life. I was moving toward something new, toward becoming someone I could actually respect. "No," I said. "I'm not running. I'm starting over." Grant smiled, and the smile changed his whole face. "Good, so am I." Our friendship grew deeper over the following months. Grant fixed things around Aunt Maggie's house: the loose porch railing, the stuck window, the gate that wouldn't latch. He installed motion sensor lights and better locks, saying he had a bad feeling, though he never explained why. Aunt Maggie liked him instantly. "That's a good man," she told me one evening after he left. "The kind who stands beside you instead of in front of you." I knew she was right. Grant never tried to fix me, save me, or make decisions for me. He just showed up, beside me, reliable. And slowly I started to trust again. Then one afternoon, I came home and found the front door open. My heart clenched. I froze in the walkway, keys dangling from my hand. From the outside, nothing looked disturbed, but the door was definitely ajar, trembling slightly in the breeze. I called Grant. He arrived 5 minutes later, and I watched him shift from the quiet man I knew into someone else entirely. Alert, dangerous, moving through the house with practiced efficiency. "Someone was in here," he said, examining muddy footprints on the kitchen floor. "They rummaged through the desk drawers, took cash from the cookie jar." "Why would someone do that?" I asked, my voice shaking. Grant's jaw tightened. "It wasn't random. This was targeted. Someone's looking for you." That night, he slept on the couch with a baseball bat beside him. I lay awake in the bedroom, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. Who was looking for me? Mason? His family? Or someone from Grant's past who had found him and decided to reach him through me? The answer came 3 days later, when Mason himself showed up at Aunt Maggie's front door. 1 year. It had been 1 full year since I'd heard his voice. But the moment I opened the door and saw him standing there, time collapsed. He looked terrible. Thinner, dark circles under his eyes. His expression hollowed out like he'd spent months drowning in regret and sleepless nights. He raised both hands as if surrendering. "Eleanor, please, can we talk for a minute?" My voice came out calmer than I expected. "How did you find me?" It took a long time. I've been searching for over a year. I finally hired a private investigator who tracked your trail from that bus station. I needed to see you." Before I could react, I felt Grant behind me. He stepped between us with a smooth, protective motion, his body becoming a shield. "Who are you?" Grant asked, his voice low and dangerous. Mason blinked, clearly not expecting anyone else. "I'm her husband." The word hit me like a blunt force. Husband. As if a year of abandonment and silence hadn't severed anything that still legally tied us together. "No," I said, stepping out from behind Grant. "You're not anymore. Not in any way that matters." Mason's face tightened. "Eleanor, please." "Just 5 minutes. I need to explain." I looked at Grant. He gave me a small nod. My choice. I stepped onto the porch but kept the door open, keeping Grant within sight. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. Mason shoved his hands into his pockets, unable to look me in the eye. "I've been looking for you ever since that video went viral," he said. "What video?" He winced. "About a year after you disappeared, London and Haley started a podcast. They told stories from their prank channel, and one day they told the story of the gas station, about leaving you there. They thought it was hilarious." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. "It blew up," Mason continued, his voice raw. "But not in the way they expected. People were furious. They called it abuse, domestic violence, psychological torture. Someone traced my identity. People realized you were never coming back. The internet destroyed us. I lost my job. London and Haley lost all their sponsors. Our families disowned us. Everything collapsed." "And that's why you're here?" I asked, my voice icy. "Because you need me to tell people you're not a monster, so you can get your life back?" "No!" He finally looked up, anguish carved into his face. "I'm here because I can't live with what I did anymore. Because it took me a year to understand I destroyed the best thing in my life. Because I need you to know that I love you." "Love. That's funny," I said quietly. "You left me. You laughed and drove away." "I know. I was cruel and stupid, and I thought you'd call. That you'd need me. I didn't realize you were better off without me until you proved it by never coming back." He took a shaky breath. "I just needed you to hear me say it. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so, so sorry." The door behind me opened and Grant stepped out. He didn't say a word. He just came to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. Mason saw that gesture. "Who is he?" "Someone who sees me," I said simply. "Someone who stood by me while I rebuilt myself. Someone who never tried to change me, fix me, or use me for a joke." Mason's shoulders dropped. He looked at Grant, then at our hands, then at me. "I'm glad," he said, and I believed him. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that what I did haunts me every day." "Good," I said softly. "It should." He nodded slowly. "I'll go. But Eleanor, there's one more thing you should know. London and Haley are in legal trouble. They pulled another stunt. Left a girl trapped in an office building overnight. Filmed her panic attack. She's suing. They're claiming I masterminded the whole thing. The prosecutor wants to establish a pattern, and your case, they want you to testify." Before I could answer, he pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. "This is the prosecutor's number, no pressure. but if you want to tell your story, it could stop them from hurting anyone else. I took the card, gripping it tightly. Mason stepped off the porch and paused at the gate. Anyway, I'm glad you got away from me. You deserve so much better. Then he walked off, heading toward a rental car parked down the block. He didn't look back. Grant squeezed my hand. You okay? I think so, I said, and I truly meant it. 4 months later, I stood in the courthouse, wearing the navy blue blazer I bought just for this day, and told my story to the jury. London and Haley sat at the defense table in ill-fitting suits, looking smaller than I remembered. The smugness was gone. No cameras, no confident smiles. Just two girls realizing that every action has consequences. Their newest victim, a young woman named Isabella, who had suffered a severe panic attack during their overnight challenge prank, had filed charges of reckless endangerment. And because the internet never forgets, my story had become part of the prosecution's case to establish a pattern. I told the jury everything, not with anger or bitterness, but with the clarity of someone who had survived and healed. I explained what it felt like to be abandoned in the middle of a desert with no resources. I told them about the years of small cruelties that led to that moment, the things that slowly destroyed my marriage. I described how their pranks had stripped away my safety, my trust, and my sense of partnership. They don't see the aftermath, I said, looking the jurors in the eye. They don't see the woman waking up from nightmares months later. They don't see the slow collapse of trust when the people who should love you treat you like a prop in their entertainment. They call it fun. I call it cruelty dressed up as comedy. When I finished, the courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked unsettled. As I stepped down from the witness stand, I glanced toward the gallery. Mason was there. He'd been called as a character witness for me and our marriage. Our eyes met for a moment. He was crying quietly. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps, but Grant moved us through them effortlessly. The sun was bright, the air clean, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Mason appeared at the top of the courthouse steps just as we were leaving. Eleanor, wait! I turned. I just wanted to say, thank you for telling the truth. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it for Isabella, and for anyone else they might hurt. I know. He looked at Grant, then back at me. He's good to you. I can see that. He doesn't try to fix me, I said. He just stands beside me while I fix myself. Mason nodded, tears rolling down his cheeks. Do you hate me? I had thought about this question a long time. A year ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now, standing in the sunlight, Grant's warm hand holding mine, and a future spreading out in front of me, full of possibility, I realized something surprising. No, I said. I don't hate you, Mason. I just don't belong to you anymore. I'm not sure I ever really did. His face twisted, but he still nodded. I suppose I deserve that. You do, I agreed. But I hope you learn from this. I hope you become someone who doesn't need to hurt people to feel strong. I'm trying, he whispered. Every day, I'm trying. I believed him. And more importantly, I realized I didn't need to stay and watch him succeed or fail. His journey was no longer my responsibility. Grant and I walked down the courthouse steps together. 3 days later, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts. London and Haley were sentenced to community service, heavy fines, and probation. More importantly, their platform was destroyed. No more podcast. No more prank channel. No more victims. 1 week after the criminal verdict, Grant and I drove back to the courthouse one last time. I had already prepared and filed the unilateral divorce petition myself during the same week Mason showed up at Aunt Maggie's door. No mediation, no negotiation, no need for him to appear at any earlier hearing. Just one short line in the filing. The respondent abandoned the petitioner in a dangerous condition and provided no support or contact for more than 1 continuous year. The case file included Mason's final text message, the viral prank video, the old police report, and Shelley's notarized statement. Mason was there that day too, summoned to sign additional documents. He sat in the last row, gaunt, wearing the same gray suit from the day I testified. When the clerk called his name, he stood and walked up without once looking at me. The attorney handed him a pen. Mason took it and signed every box. Agree to divorce, no asset dispute, willingly assume all court costs and fees. No objections, no bargaining. Only the sound of the pen sliding across paper and the sharp crack of the judge's gavel. The marriage between Mrs. Eleanor Morgan and Mr. Mason Whitlock is officially dissolved as of today. I received 2 fresh copies of the divorce decree, still warm from the clerk's printer. Grant stood right behind me, saying nothing, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Just enough to remind me he was there, but not enough to intrude on a moment that was mine alone. Out in the hallway, I opened the envelope and pulled out 1 copy. The paper was thin, but impossibly heavy with the 5 years it represented. I looked at the bright red stamp reading "Divorced," and I smiled. Not a victorious smile, but the smile of someone who has finally cut free the last rope anchoring her to the ocean floor. I folded the paper slowly, slipped it into my coat pocket, then suddenly turned and walked toward Mason, standing quietly at the far end of the hall. I handed him the other copy. "Take it," I said. "You need it more than I do." Mason looked up, eyes swollen. He took the document with both trembling hands, as if afraid to crease it. "Thank you," he whispered, voice rough. "Thank you for ending it properly." I nodded, said nothing, and walked back to where Grant was waiting. He held out his hand, and I took it. We walked out of the courthouse together, autumn sunlight flooding over our intertwined fingers, the hands of 2 free people, coming together only after each had cut their own chains. As the car rolled out of the parking lot, I lowered the window and let the ocean wind rush through my hair. Grant glanced over, smiling softly. "So now what? Eleanor Morgan?" I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. Now we go home, our home. I didn't put the remaining divorce paper in a drawer. I burned it that night on the beach. The small flame rose, carrying with it the final remnant of the Whitlock name for my life. The ashes lifted, drifted into the air, blended with the waves, dissolved into the sea. From this moment on, I had only one name, Eleanor Morgan, and I had never seen it look so beautiful. That night, Grant and I sat on Aunt Maggie's porch watching the sunset. The sky was glowing with shades of orange and pink, the sound of the waves rolling in creating a soft, steady rhythm. "How do you feel?" Grant asked. I thought about it for a moment. Finally, I said, "Beautiful. Tonight is beautiful." "Good." He squeezed my hand. "You know, I've been thinking. This town is pretty great. I could stay." "Could you?" I asked, smiling. "Depends on whether there's a reason to stay." I turned to look at him. The man who had been broken and betrayed just like I had. The man who had wandered into a small diner on a random Tuesday and collapsed on the floor while I tried to save him. The man who showed me what a real partnership looks like. "I think there is," I whispered. He smiled, and that smile changed his whole face. "Yeah, I think so too." 6 months later, Grant and I bought a little house together. Both our names on the deed, a real partnership. We started a small security consulting business, using Grant's detective experience and my newfound resolve to help people protect themselves. And when Mason reached out one last time, years later, to tell me he had remarried, to a kind woman who didn't tolerate his family's nonsense, who helped him set boundaries with his sister and mother, I was genuinely happy for him. Because that is the beauty of healing. It lets you wish good things for the people who hurt you, not because they deserve it, but because their suffering no longer defines your happiness. Sometimes I think back to that day at the gas station. The heat, the dust, the laughter fading away. And I realize it wasn't the worst day of my life. It was the best one. It was the day I stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission to be whole. It was the day I saved myself. The gas station, the abandonment, the cruel prank. Those were supposed to be my rock bottom. They thought they were breaking me. They thought I would crawl back, desperate and small. Instead, they gave me the greatest gift anyone ever could. They showed me exactly how strong I already was. Strong enough to walk away. Strong enough to start over. Strong enough to choose myself. Today, when I pour coffee at the diner, or help a client install a security system, or sit on the porch with Grant watching the sunset, I sometimes remember that woman standing alone by the gas pump with nothing but dust and despair. And I am grateful for her, the frightened, wounded woman who refused to sit on a curb waiting for men who were never worth waiting for. She walked away from everything familiar and stepped into a life she had to build from scratch. And in doing so, she became the woman she was always meant to be. If this story spoke to you, if it made you feel something, even just for a moment, then please take a second to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories just like this one. Your support helps these voices continue to be heard. Thank you for being here,